Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is your other, now bedoggled host,
Brian. Hi, how's it going?
Aroo.
Yeah, indeed. How are you?
Good. Yeah, pretty good. I think I'm eager to get straight into the old bronze banter so we can talk about new exciting developments here at BBHQ.
Yeah.
But to start off with, we are going to be this week talking about Season 7, Episode 9, Never Leave Me, of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, so this episode was written by Drew Goddard, who last wrote Conversations with Dead People, and was directed by David Solomon, who last directed Selfless. It's first aired on November 26th, 2002, and here is your Buffy and summary. I feel like I did that completely out of order, but anyway. Andrew's murder of Jonathan was a failed ritual. Warren sends him out for blood and is captured by Willow. Buffy realizes that Spike sees things and is triggered by a song. Spike tries to kill Andrew, who tells the Scoobies all he knows. The house is attacked by Harbingers, servants of the first evil, and Spike is abducted. Other Harbingers destroy the Watchers Council.
Harbingers,
yeah. Harbingers torture Spike, whose blood opens the seal for primordial übervamp. That's wrong, right? Read the council. Isn't that Caleb who destroys it?
Who can say destroy the council? I was too busy correcting you.
The Harbingers. That was the point at which you actually corrected me, was when I was saying that. So
Yes. So retroactively they say it was Caleb, yeah.
Is it retroactively, or is it, just
Caleb
revealed?
Caleb is, yeah, well, that's exactly it. So, but like from the perspective of this Buffy and summary, they should already know that, yeah.
True. Okay.
So, but we will come to that boring secondary Buffy related stuff, because I would start off with our bronze banter. Our big news is that the bronze is now dog friendly. We've got a new addition to the to Team Buffy Boys, because we've adopted a greyhound who we have named Ludo. Yeah, we did indeed. So it's something we've been working on for, what I would say is I've been working on it for 31 years realistically.
So one of the major motivations we had in buying a house was getting a dog, because you can't really rent and own a dog in Dublin, or I'd imagine it's more possible outside of the city or outside of Dublin, in the sense that like if people who are renting out houses are more likely to, certainly living in an apartment, dogs were absolutely not allowed. Cats weren't either, but that's a story for another time. But I'm a massive dog person and just animal person in general. I remember when I was like 9 or 10 when we got our first dog, whose name was Pip, and she was a Shih Tzu, and she was lovely. But when we picked her up and we drove home from picking her up, I thought that the car was going to crash, because my life had reached such a level of perfection owning a dog that I thought it was impossible to stay alive like that. So really like dogs. I think they're great. We have a golden retriever. My family does. In my family home, her name is Scout, and she's wonderful. Though she's for sure on the way out at the moment, which is no problem. She's gotten to that age and she's just had a wonderful life. But that's all to say, I really wanted to get a dog because I love dogs. So we decided to get a greyhound because Joel thinks they're really silly. I think, well, I've turned out to be incredibly correct about that. I just think they look wonderful. They're very kind. They're real tall. I like having like a weird, tall, gangly dog around me, because like I'm weird, tall, and gangly, and I feel like we occupy similar volumes of space. And yeah, so there was a whole process in adopting greyhounds, because pandemic and all that kind of stuff, and also having to make sure that he is copacetic with our pre-existing Buffy boy Booker and all that. But yeah, he's been here, was it 4 days now? Since Saturday, and it's now Tuesday, so this is his fourth day here, really. It's not like he's been here 72 hours, I would say. It's an interesting one. So if you're wondering, greyhounds as pets, what's the deal there? Well, let me give you all the information that I've read repeatedly for years now. But essentially, lots of greyhounds are raced in Ireland specifically. We've quite a culture of it, which is really shit, because greyhound racing is super inhumane, especially the way dogs are treated. Something in the region of like 10,000 greyhounds are born every year, and about like 2,000 of them are accounted for in terms of what happens to them after a couple of years. So most of them are being destroyed realistically if they're not racing well enough. So there are a couple of charities and different adoption or dog rescues who specifically take on greyhounds because there is this issue, and they take on greyhounds to rehome them as pets because they're wonderful pets. They are lazy, sweet, gentle, like massive creatures. So they're often discussed as being very good apartment dogs, and definitely some of them do seem to be. They sleep like 20 hours a day, and they need reasonably little exercise. So I think, kind of like 40 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes kind of thing a day is somewhere between those two is a sweet spot. Probably an hour plus, but versus...
I think that's counterintuitive for some people because they see greyhounds as assume them to be really fast, energetic dogs, and like they have that capacity for energy, but they're quite like couch potatoes otherwise.
They really are. So yeah, we also were concerned in terms of greyhounds and cats, given that greyhounds have quite strong prey drives. So we basically they do a lot of cat testing when they get greyhounds to see if any of them are suitable to live with cats. Our Ludo is specifically, or they determined him to be. He was in a foster for like 3 months or something, or nearly 3 months, I'd say, overall, with cats, and didn't pay them any attention. We've had him here since Saturday, and he seems to be mostly afraid of Booker, though he's mostly afraid of everything because he's a nervous boy.
Yeah.
He's an absolute sweetheart. He's all black, which is nice. We'll post a picture of him.
I'm absolutely going to exploit the social media cachet of this dog. And he matches Booker pretty well.
He does. They're very similar looking.
He's kind of dozing on the couch behind us at the moment, so you may hear a characteristic greyhound at some point.
Yeah, no, he's wonderful though.
A late show addition, but a popular character, I'm expecting.
I think so too. I'm trying to think what else. Was this inspired by Jenna Marbles? Maybe a little bit. I love Jenna Marbles.
Jenna Marbles' reclamation project here.
Yeah, no. I don't know what else to say. He's great, and if you have any questions about adopting a greyhound, please get in touch with us. We'll let you know about things. But yeah, I'm very excited to kind of, have a dog forever now.
Yeah, it'll be an ongoing feature, I think. So what else has been going for us recently? Yeah,
so we got a wonderful email during the week from a Buffy Boys superfan. If you want to tell us about that, Joel?
Yeah, so I suppose it's we always appreciate fan mail and fan feedback and fan content and superfan engagement, and just a shout out to Xena, who is a long time superfan, who I think was a very lovely, very eloquent letter talking about many shared interests, and also just want to take this opportunity to thank her for that, to congratulate her on a recent wedding, which is a challenge which we will accept. I absolutely want a Buffy Boys themed wedding soon, so Brian was letting you know.
Buffy Boys themed wedding?
Yeah, specifically themed to our podcast.
Okay, cool.
I think early congratulations on her upcoming birthday, which we've been informed will be highly mandatorily Buffy themed, including
aggressively Buffy themed.
Intentionally, including some bronze themed dressing and accoutrement as well. So very impressive all around. Very, very lovely to receive. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and she also mentioned Sally Rooney's recent recent statement about publishing her new book, which is Beautiful World, Where Are You? In Israel specifically, and around the BDS movement, and just highlighting how thoughtful and precise and determined the Sally Rooney statement was. I'd actually read it, and I totally agree. It's a really strong statement. And if you haven't read it yet, do go out and just Google Sally Rooney Israel statement, and it's widely published and thoughtful, considerate.
There's a long and strong support in Ireland for BDS for various, I suppose, kind of relationship reasons there, it's a good statement for kind of a strong Irish voice to make, and I'm absolutely tickled by some of the column writers, the opinion wonks. I think I've said this before, but a good rule of thumb I heard once is that if you ever see a column that starts with a question, the answer is probably no, you know? And like a lot of columns like,
has Sally Rooney disrupted the peace process in the Middle East?
Has Israel been spared the boring words of Sally Rooney was one I read. And just like so like people with tiny brains, yeah.
There's also, I think, a touch of misogyny.
100%. It's like who does this woman think this young woman thinks she is, talking about things that are too big for her. That's the tone of all of this.
Good fucking luck. Sally Rooney is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life. Like one of the most whip smart, like literally is a like celebrated competition winning debater, like formal debating. Like I should think, I'm not sure if she won a European award or an Irish award. I think it was a European award for debating. She is that good at it. So good. And also like not just like an excellent speaker, she has like just insane amounts of like just knowledge in that brain and great criticism. So good fucking luck.
But on the other side we have middle-aged English white people who reckon something. So anyway.
Yeah, true. Okay, and the other thing, Joe, you wanted to talk about was your recent reading list.
Yeah, so, for ages 10 and up. I read recently two Buffy books for young readers. I think it's Little and Brown Young Readers range, and they were written and illustrated by Carolyn Nowak, and there's two of them published so far. Buffy the Vampire Slayer and New School Nightmare, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer The Cursed Coven, 2018 and 2019 respectively. So these are actually beautiful little hardbacks. I feel like I'm on an infomercial at the moment. Yeah, $29.99. And yeah, I was quite impressed with them. They're you know, we know there's some time material that is pretty cheap, you know, and this is not that. These are quite lovingly written. So it's to introduce Buffy as a concept and a premise to young readers, so kind of ages 11, 12, and as a reader, you know, as a kind of a teaching tool, but also a story. And it takes the Buffy setting, and I think does a really good job of simplifying it, but including loads of the goodness of Buffy, but adjusting it for that kind of demographic. So in this, Buffy is called when she's 12, not 15. She moves with Joyce, instead of to Sunnydale, California, moves to Cleveland, where we've often heard the second another Hellmouth is,
which is where the
Wishverse Buffy moves to, or as this book refers it to, the Heckmouth. And yeah, so she has some broadly similar adventures there. It's kind of trying to balance being a Slayer with also being a middle schooler. She forms a different Scooby pack with two friends, Serafina, who turns out to be a witch, and Alvaro, who turns out to be a werewolf.
Serafina has to be a reference to the Northern Lights.
That's right? What I thought. That's what I hoped as well. Yeah, and they're both
like a witch called Serafina. Like, I mean, specifically, that's very close. I mean, go ahead.
Absolutely, and they're both people of color, and I get the impression. I don't know if it's specifically confirmed, but the werewolf has kind of gay vibes to me, kind of fruity vibes. And and they're both well developed characters, and they have a different watcher, Mrs. Sparks, and you know they weave in a lot of the you know, there's a lot of touches there for people who are familiar with Buffy without relying on them. Like, for example, their first big bad turns out to be the principal, and he's a vampire who uses the gem of Amara, which Spike used in the kind of the main show to remain invulnerable to death and sunlight, and that's what makes him the master essentially. So they have to get the gem off of him.
And what did Angel use it for again?
He uses it to have like a lovely day out, and then destroys it.
Okay.
I think potentially. No, that's not the time he's human. But he uses it to like be human in the third episode, basically, of Angel, and then destroys it, I think.
Fair enough.
And then there's an exploration of kind of Serafina with her coven, and it turns out the second big bag is the Heckmouth spawn from season 1 of Buffy.
Okay.
Kind of the monster
that comes out. Yeah,
essentially.
Okay, cool.
But it's influencing them, and there are touches to say that elsewhere in the world, you know, Miss Sparks told me about. There's these this famous couple, Spike and Drusilla, which everyone seems to love in the vampire world. Hope I never meet him, that kind of thing. Yeah,
that's cute.
But then they actually have some quite nice moments. Like we have a version of the moment where Joyce, you know, doesn't really understand what Buffy is talking about when she's about to confront the big bad, but says, "I believe in you, and you can do anything you set your mind to." And it actually reads like Joyce, and so I was quite impressed with them. I think very nice little side inclusions.
You know what's pretty sad is that, like, you know, I'm not sure if that's a reflection of, you know, what we're trying to model for parents and children these days, is like that kind of acceptance and love in those kind of contexts, which especially are like coded as like coming out, or like, you know, difficult topics about yourself that your parents have to accept. Is it's funny that, like, you know, if you go take it in the 90s, it feels very natural for the parent to say this is weird and like don't accept it, and then now it's like, well, you can't write that. That's not okay.
It's a very valid point. In this case, I think it's more that Buffy hasn't told her, so she's like, I don't know what's going on for you, but whatever it is, I know you can handle it.
Which what Joyce in Buffy proper says is, like, you know, she basically ignores it for years, and when she has to get confronted with it, she says, get out of my house. So anyway, well, not quite get out of my house, but you know what I mean. It's just, I think that's an interesting, I think it's probably writing back against the original text. I mean, to say, here's updated, better response.
Yeah, 100%. And just to finish on a note, like, I think another good example of that in these is the Watcher Miss Sparks is in the kind of the group chat with them, but it's like an old person doing it. At one point, there's like a classic thing you see in one of these where she's explaining about the big bag. She says the Earth is definitely doomed, because they're all on their phones. And then they're like, well, actually, no, we're helping, because you see here, I was looking up all of the recent like neck ruptures in town. And then, you know, another person's like, yeah, and I was kind of cross-referencing it with kind of like looking on, you know, the phone book here online and seeing who's social media. And she's like, oh, okay, great. You know, so there's just like a nice little kind of integrate. It was definitely written with like, let's not be boomers about this anymore. Which I enjoyed. So if you have relatives around that age and you'd like to introduce them to a pretty good Rieger, and also something which can get them on the Buffy train, Carolyn Nowak's Young Rieger series, I recommend that.
They're also like, they're gorgeous looking.
Yeah, they are. They are actually genuinely beautifully illustrated.
Great. Okay, cool. Let's move into the episode.
So, speaking of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and speaking of people being in Buffy's house without permission a lot of the time, or invitation.
And speaking of creatures that are trapped in our house and can't get out and are slowly learning to trust us.
Yeah, 100%. We have this episode of Buffy, which really, I think, starts to set the final shape for the season, even though there's a couple more detours from here. We have this kind of classic escalation moment in this episode where we have kind of the proper introduction of the first. We have the kind of elimination of the Watchers Council. We have the stage set for the Turok and the potentials arriving. So like, this is all kind of classic endgame stuff starting to be developed here.
Yeah, no, it's an odd episode. I think it's kind of bad, personally.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it.
I think it was aimless. I think it had two scenes it wanted to get to, and kind of just bumbled its way around trying to like get to those things, you know. This feels like an episode that should come episode 20 of a 22 episode season, where it's like kind of that point you're kind of like trying to like gather what you're thinking about. So yeah, it didn't do it for me as an episode. I think it was not great.
What are the two scenes you felt it was building towards?
So, well, not building towards. I think structured around is probably better put.
Fair.
But definitely the interrogation scenes, and then I suppose maybe three. The interrogation scenes, the kidnapping, and then the bleeding. Everything else was pretty superfluous, I thought. As in, like, you know, I think those three things could have been maybe the first 20 minutes of an episode, and then the rest of the episode be something else. Or maybe, like, you know, other things happening around it. Like, you know, Willow in this episode, like, nothing happens. She's there the whole time, and she gets knocked out for the final fight because she's too powerful, which apparently is a consistent thing throughout season 7. But
also with her taking on the more Giles like role, she has to be knocked out as frequently as possible.
It's so true. But otherwise, it's very, like, very light episode in terms of what actually happens. I thought. What was your thoughts about it?
I think this is the genre TV show's burden, which is the exposition episode.
Yes.
Which functionally just is necessary at times, because shows like this are saying a lot of made up stuff that you can't infer, you know. Like the Rieger can't deduce from looking at this that yes, it's the first evil, you know. So I agree that like it's kind of oddly structured, as in like unlike a very strong Buffy episode, it doesn't have like it certainly doesn't have a clear monster or a clear like theme that it's building. It's more like a collection of interactions.
Yeah.
And it's moving pieces into place. So we want Andrew in the Buffy house, the Summers house. We want Spike kind of on side and contained. We want to introduce the first, destroy the Watchers Council, all this kind of stuff. And introduce some kind of mystique around Robin Wood,
which goes nowhere.
Yeah, so we'll come to that. But I think some of the things that they get to are enjoyable. There may be enjoyable elements to having the tapestry rather than necessarily enjoyable scenes by themselves. Like for example, like things I enjoy about this episode and things I like that exist are, I think that the interrogation scenes are fun and funny. I definitely think that it's the most likable that Xander has been in a long time. I think in this episode he just like works well as a member of the team again, and I think with
because he's mostly quiet, but no, he's fun as well actually. Yeah, you're right. I think this is the most I've enjoyed him in an episode.
It's fun. Like when he gets slapped by Anya, he looks genuinely hurt, you know. That's funny. They work well together, Anya and Xander.
That scene where, so there's basically, for context, they're both interrogating Andrew. They're doing a good cop bad cop moment, and Xander's like, Anya, can I talk to you outside for a minute, because she's just slapped Andrew. And they go outside and they quickly break into like, you know, like excited, like collaborative giggles, being like, "Oh my god, the slap was so amazing!" And she's like, "Yeah, I was just feeling it in the moment." And it's genuinely well written, and like, you know,
I can see us doing that.
And chemistry, you know, it communicates a chemistry that I think Xander and Anya never really had before this point.
You would be the bad cop, I think.
I think I would be the bad cop and the good cop. I think you'd be the person sitting in the corner watching, and I'll be like, "You think I'm bad? Wait until this guy opens up his mouth." And then you'd walk out of the room and start laughing.
The cigarette smoking man, yeah.
Because like, while you are a very good actor, like Joel, traditionally, like I met Joel because you were like acting in the play that I was producing, which sounds hilarious. But I think you're a really bad liar.
I'm not a great liar. I don't enjoy to lie. Well, so Niger does Buffy, and she's the chosen one. So
yeah, but I'm a great liar. You see,
you are. So that's enjoyable. I thought that some of the stuff with Spike when he is under the first influence, and she hears him talking to himself in the room. She comes back in. He's very like, "Oh no, Buffy, everything's fine." Yeah, and then goes absolutely feral. Is once again manages to maintain the scariness of a normal vampire quite a bit. Yeah. And I think that the idea of the stuff with the council is a great idea. I like the idea that, you know, it sets up this kind of, you know, bigger organizational thing, and then the shock of having them all killed. The scene itself, though, I was surprised that it was a little hokey. A little bit of like we're in England, we see basically all the same watchers we saw at the end of season 5.
I thought it was impressive. So too, impressive, like getting them back. I mean, like maybe they are reasonably like, you know, maybe they weren't hugely sought after extras, actors kind of thing, but still making the effort to go out and find them and get them back in. It's like the one or two of them didn't have any lines while having been in the original episode. So
yeah, 100%. And then it's you know, that they're aware that there's something building. They still kind of don't respect Buffy as just the girl who is the Slayer, but then after they're hit by the Harbingers, they're like, okay, we need to actually mobilize, go where we can help in Sunnydale, give it proper operational support, and then a bomb destroys the building, which is, and to be honest, a note that I have like remembering anything I have like like written since, you know, just like that. It's not always interesting to see the big thing. Sometimes you want to isolate your characters, you know. Like I would say, yeah, actually, to be fair, in our Dungeons and Dragons campaign, there was a thing recently where there was a summit and all the Leaguers were killed. I think that's probably just was inspired by the Watchers Council stuff. Yeah. So Travers is quoting Invictus by William Henley. Kind of, I think there's a bit of Shakespeare in there potentially as well.
Yeah, was it? I can't remember Shakespeare.
By wise counsel, you should make your war, and it's because they're the council. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also Revelations. No, was it Revelations? It was some Bible verse as well that he quoted the chapter and verse afterwards.
Yeah, but yeah, it's effective, and yeah, I think the other kind of active elements are so one of the kind of the oft quoted things is like Robin Wood somehow intuits that Jonathan has been killed in the basement, takes his body and buries it elsewhere, and it's meant to keep you in mind of two things. One is that Robin is aware of the supernatural stuff happening and that he may or may not be on the right side of it.
Yeah, which I think might be connected to that storyline that we were like, what the fuck, in episode 1, in terms of where did that talisman come from in I can't remember what that episode was called. Lessons is
the first episode. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, remember when we were like, oh, where did that come from? And it's kind of implied that Robin would probably put it there, and that was kind of building. And this never quite goes anywhere in terms of like, you know, why did he bury a body that he finds?
And I think with a lot of the lore for season 7, I think that becomes pretty standard. Like one of the things you get pointed at a lot is that why they get a few drops of Spike's blood unlock the seal of Danzatar.
When Jonathan's whole body didn't.
Yeah, why was he able to bleed at all when he's a vampire? But to be honest, like that, vampires are always doing human type things. Like Angel's bleeding all the time. Do you?
Well, I mean, so I saw that note as well. Vampires not being able to bleed. They can though, in the sense that like
but it's really pumping, I suppose. Yeah.
True, but one of the important things about vampires in terms of siring someone is that a vampire drinks your blood and then you drink some of theirs, and that's how they turn you into vampire. Yeah,
100%. So I think from this point we start to we're accelerating to a speed that some of the lore is kind of like shearing off.
Yes.
Like a Aaron Wingshield or like a Cyvumir. But no, it still gets us there, and I think it's sometimes important to remember that would you really rather that all of this is like pitch perfect, or would you rather your characters where they need to be? Yeah,
100% the latter.
Yeah, and I think having the stuff with Andrew, having him in that space, having him confront or being confronted by Willow, all that's enjoyable. Yeah,
absolutely, 100%. Some of the interesting things is just I think that the primary core of this episode is Spike in terms of his kind of ongoing storyline, which is an addict who has recently relapsed and is currently DTing, and then is made to re-engage with his addiction, and then also which is interesting enough in some ways, he takes an interesting tone in this episode where he is very much kind of all over the place in quite a well-written way. He's both kind of communicating consistently to Buffy, kill me, I shouldn't exist in this situation anymore, it's bad, and then also kind of this sort of clarity that's kind of unusual for not unusual, it's quite consistent with Spike, because Spike is the truth sayer, as we've often said, but in this episode he has a lot of truthful observances, but they're delivered very very straightforwardly, because he is just so rocked to his core, and then obviously as you highlighted, the twist into conditioned Spike is always it's well acted, and it's menacing when he puts his hands through the wall to get to Andrew. That was cool.
Yeah, it's real kind of it's like monster killer kind of thing.
Yeah, it was menacing. It was fascinating. But then also we in this episode kind of see Buffy really committing to Spike in a way that is unexpected and interesting and quite narratively fascinating. I think Buffy as a character tends to really focus on the soul as a determining internal factor in terms of who is saved, who is helped, who will be redeemed. In this episode, she kind of tells Spike that she's going to help him regardless. She's going to continue to try to help because she knows that he is in such deep pain, and he is not doing this of his own accord. And Buffy's commitment to that, I think, is the thing that pulls Spike through the next couple episodes in terms of being tortured by the first.
Good thing she told him now.
Exactly, yeah. But it's an interesting note as well for Buffy just as a character, in the sense that this is a truly Christ-like moment in an episode with more Christian imagery, where Buffy is truly forgiving the person in front of her who has done wrong to her, and she will do whatever she needs to help him. In the sense that Spike hurt her the way he did in season 6, and her response here is to help him through it, essentially.
Yeah, I think interesting note 100%, because the morality of the Buffy world is often quite Old Testament, in the sense that people transgress and then they have to atone. They have to refund that cost. There's vengeance. There's always a flow of give and take. So I think there is something. Well, we're not necessarily saying the New Testament approach is always inherently the better one, but there's something about Buffy being look, we need to just write this off of it. Yeah, we need to move forward.
Spike also tells her about his trials in Africa, which are, he's I had to go through all these trials. It's you kind of got beat up a bit.
Yeah, he punched a lot of guys.
It wasn't that impressive.
So it's an interesting progression, I think, for sure. I think that point of Buffy's believing in him is quite central to what she invests her energy in, or the kind of thing she invests in for the rest of the season. And with this episode, with the introduction of the first like properly like torturing Spike, and I think, you know, there's actually quite a lot to the narrative due to the mechanic of having her as like an evil version of Buffy basically in those scenes, as opposed to potentially just some kind of shadowy figure or whatever.
Yeah, I just had a moment there where you refer, I think you like, I mean, maybe unintentionally, but you referred to the first as she, and I was like, oh my god, the Doctor was a woman.
Oh yeah.
You know, like, I mean, we always talked about the first in terms of gendering it like masculine, and it's like, this is the first evil. Gender probably isn't hugely applicable.
Probably not a big concern, yeah.
Anyway, so another point to note is this episode has more Spike on the cross imagery. So we saw that in which was the episode where Spike lays on the cross? Was it Beneath You?
Yes.
Okay, whatever that episode was, where he lays on the cross and like kind of like smokes his body up.
Smoke my body up.
Very clear Christian imagery, like literal Christian imagery. In this episode, he is crucified in his
another muscular Christ situation.
Literally, in his bleeding, and apparently the original plan was to have him nailed to this. And the network censors were like, no, you can use leather straps to tie him to it. You're not going to fucking crucify someone on TV before the watershed. Anyway, and this is all, of course, building up to Spike's moment at the end of the season, which, of course, he does give his life in a very Christ-like way for the savior of ladies.
Yeah, we'll get to that. It was a great end for his character, really.
Yes.
Like you have to consider that an end, and the same with a gift is an end, you know, and then something came after it. Yeah,
I agree.
I don't think they wrote that scene for him being like, and then an angel, this is going to happen.
Is there anything you want to say about the Anders stuff? He's an odd character in the sense that I always find he's kind of slightly badly written. He never has a true moral turning point. He's just kind of opportunistic.
No, he's so, like, I actually was surprised at how craven he is through this whole thing. Like, I always thought would get to a point by season 7 where he was kind of like pathetic and likable, because by the end of this, he's meant to be kind of on the team. In Angel, he becomes a watcher, and like that he always portrayed as like a dweeb, but part of the team. Mm-hmm. But like, he would sell these people out in a heartbeat. You know
certainly at this point. I think by storyteller and that kind of time, he does kind of like settle into it, but I'm not sure how much of it is just like, here are my new friends who are cool.
I'm not sure if he deserves it, is the only thing. And also, like, I think they intimate that even though he is being influenced by the first, like, is it suggesting that up until now, until some level, he thinks that it is actually Warren's ghost who is trying to resurrect himself or whatever, and he loves Warren, etc. So if that's the case, when he morphs into Jonathan, what does he think is happening? Do you think that Jonathan and Warren are together? Yeah, no. So I think in the same way that, like, you know, if you see Willow in conversations with dead people, who is like, here's a dead person in front of me who's communicating with me, I believe them. You know, or like, you know, I'm buying in to some degree. It's the same thing, except he's showing what the weaker willed person ends up happening to them in terms of him being so suggestible. Yeah. So he's buying a hook, line, and sinker. I don't think he thinks that they're resurrected. I think they're ghosts talking to him, or their spirits, or their machinations, or something. But he thinks it's distinctly Warren and Jonathan.
He 100% thinks it's those people. Yes.
Like, what an idiot.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, it's an interesting one. We'll keep an eye on his character as the season goes on. Do you have anything else to talk about for this episode, Joe?
No, I think that's everything for this particular Buffy episode. I think a lot of the things that are introduced here are just like the things we'll be doing now for the next while. We should mention that this also has the first introduction of the Turok or the übervamp, as well as kind of the reveal. I
didn't love the visuals of the übervamp at the end of the episode. I found it a little underwhelming, and I remember it being better as the season goes on. Yeah. So hopefully that's the case, because the makeup just looked a bit meh.
I think it looks okay, but I think we're so familiar with them by now, and definitely from my going into this, when you know that the Hellmouth is just full of these guys, and they become a real just visual shortcut in the comics and the expanded universe stuff. Is just like, oh, because it's such an easy thing to be like, I remember the Turok, that I think they're delusion, but I think the initial idea of raising, like, going back to the beginning and raising like one of the original vampires is a strong one. I like it.
No, I remember feeling very threatened by him when I was watching this week on week when I was 12. Finding, like, you know, oh my god, like, you know, just can these things just not be killed? And I was like terrified by it.
You can't kill Robb Stark. He's the king of the North.
And then by the time you get to the season finale, I mean, people talk all the time about how awful it is that by the season finale, übervamps are just getting slayed left, right, and center. I'm fine with it. You know, it's the many ninjas issue in some ways, but also it's like
it's not unique to Buffy in any. It's not unique failing of Buffy.
No, of course, and it's also like your final episode. It's fine to like have a battle.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so yeah, I remember feeling really threatened by them, and I'll see how that goes in the next couple of episodes. And I remember the episode in a couple of episodes time, Showtime I think it's called, where Buffy does kill the übervamp. It's like real like ooh. Anyway, okay, let's move into the bronze banter. Here's some Buffy bits for you, Joel. Andrew is in every episode after this point, which is pretty cool. As in like, you know, Andrew's a great character to be there. You know, moral nonsense or not. As in like he's stupid, he's funny, and he's gay, which is good fun. Secondly, important to note that we were basically best friends with Tom Lenk, because our sister podcast, BFFs Forever, Ian Carlos Crawford and his podcast, Slayerfest 98, you know, we're basically the same podcast. You may not know this, but we are.
We're blood brothers.
Exactly. They're currently doing all.
But the connecting tissue you have here is that Tom Lenk has been on Ian's podcast.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's been on Ian's podcast a bunch, and they're good friends. So we're basically best friends with Tom Lenk. Anyway, yeah, I have a note here that Caleb was responsible for the water explosion, and Andrew, one of the things he says when he's about to try to kill the pig is Babe 2 was underrated. He's 100% right. Mm-hmm. Have you watched Babe 2?
Yeah.
Good. Babe 2 is a dystopian nightmare, terrifying movie. Babe 1 is wonderful. It's a very straightforward, creepy, gothic, heartwarming tale of one pig's attempt to not be eaten. Like, for a child's movie, lots of content about not wanting to be eaten. And it's also just heartwarming. I don't think I've ever watched Babe without crying.
It's a real anti-war film.
Anti-war film?
No, anti-vor film.
Anti-vor film, it sure is. Why have we talked so much about vor in the last week?
I don't know why it keeps coming up.
Anyway, so but Babe 2 is it's Pig in the City. They go to the city. It is visually just a stunning, beautiful nightmare. It's weird. It's threatening. It's one of those weird. The thing it's closest to is A Wizard of Oz 2. Mm-hmm. What's that called again?
A Wizard of Oz 2. Return to Oz.
Return to Oz. Yeah, it's most similar to that. Sorry, 1 second. I also noted that Buffy is the first person to say the first in this episode. I can't remember, and we discussed it at the time. I haven't looked it up because I'm an idiot since. But I can't remember in the episode Amends. I don't think Buffy necessarily engages with the first or talks to the first or anything like that. Though maybe
she definitely fights the Bringers.
She fights the Bringers, yeah. But I think that maybe just like Angel communicates to her afterwards or something like that.
Which is fine.
Yeah, which is fine. But I
presume all these guys meet up every so often and are like, so what weird shit did you do?
Yeah. It's a great note though that like the ultimate enemy of Buffy turns up in season 3 and then comes back in season 7. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool.
And also just to call forward something I'm going to read next on my Buffy reading list is what is it? My glasses on. What can I say? The Buffy Grimoire.
Yeah, it's the official Grimoire.
Yes, but it's actually written from it's a similar quality book to some of the things I read recently. Mm-hmm. It's written from the perspective of season 7, around episode 19, and Willow is handing over her diary from the last 7 years, basically being like, "You all should know everything I've done before we go into it." So it actually it's in present context in kind of an interesting way. So
very cool. It's also worth noting that the visuals of the episode when the seal of Danzathar,
pretty good, yeah,
thanks, is opening, it's very Stargate.
Yes, and this is that era of
plastic CGI.
An era of CGI where there was no real effort to make it look like it wasn't CGI, if you know what I mean. It was like, this is made in like 3D image renderer and whatever, like just above freeware Microsoft software was available at the time, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, Joel, do you have any Buffy bets for me?
Yeah, I thought it was a bizarre escalation where Robin was talking to the two kids who had graffitied the school, saying he's going to call the police on them. I'm not sure what they were trying to say there. And when Andrew's walking around with his long trench coat on, we have a recurrence of the same joke they make so many times on Buffy and Angel, of someone looking like they're dressed like Angel but actually someone else who's less cool usually.
Yeah.
And the butcher says to him, you know, whatever he says, like, I'll get your blood for you now, Neo. And it's like, has this you know, sometimes people in Sunnydale look like they act like they're from the 1950s. You know, remember the hospital at one point where it was like, this is a mental hospital from the 1950s. This isn't a modern healthcare facility. Has this butcher watched The Matrix?
100%. Everyone watched The Matrix in 2002.
I don't know if he would have appreciated the trans nuance of it, to be honest. And yeah, absolutely here for the ongoing joke of even when Andrew's in the house, Dawn being like, so what happened to what's his name? And Spike being like, who did I hurt? And Buffy like, oh, Tucker's brother.
Yeah. Spike, who never met Tucker.
Yeah, so I enjoyed that.
Okay, let's then... Oh, sorry, and then some fashion notes for you. So Dawn is wearing a nice red fitted shirt at the beginning of the episode. I thought that like everyone except for Buffy has changed their clothes at the beginning of the episode. Buffy's still wearing what she was wearing when she went to get Spike and to fight Spike in the basement, and everyone else has changed clothes. Anya's wearing a floral blouse with red flowers on it, and it's quite nice. Xander's wearing like just like a dark green t-shirt. It was quite normal and quite nice. I was like, you know, it was unusual. Andrew, of course, wearing his big long leather trench coat. When Dawn's in school, she's wearing a nice cute purple turtleneck, and it was just lovely and young and fetching. Oh yeah, and later on in the episode, Anya's wearing a weird like graphic top with a deer on it. It was truly the beginning of like graphic t-shirts, which is like, you know, awful.
You say that was screen printed, Brian?
I would say it wasn't. No. Yeah, and I also have like, I think actually, it's not a fashion note, but I actually thought that the camera work for the interrogation scene was quite funny and quite like amusing in the sense that it took on visual communication of interrogation. You know, the Dutch angle slightly, the shaky camera work, the kinetic nature of it. It was funny and engaging. Do you have any fashion notes for me there, Joel?
Yeah, I think I would just know about Anya's sensible orange top at the start of the episode, which I don't think you had there.
I didn't.
But otherwise, I like how they use different clothes to differentiate the first and Buffy as we kind of go on. I think potentially the first might tend to dress lighter, kind of more frillier.
Yeah.
And then Buffy tends to dress more militaristic as kind of the season goes on.
For sure.
Which I think is an interesting counterpoint.
Okay. Shall we... do you want to give me the death count there, Joel?
Yeah, so we have a reasonable amount of deaths in this episode, casualties of the war with the first. So we have one harbinger... I'm not going to say it's for everyone. One harbinger of death killed by Xander, 2 killed by Buffy with a dagger, and then in the Watchers Council in England, we have Quentin Travers, Lydia, Philip, Nigel, and several unidentified Watchers exploded. So yeah, pretty brutal.
Great. And Joel, could you give me a rating for this episode, please?
Yeah, I probably give this episode maybe a 7.2. Really hard slaps in Xander's face.
Tell me about that.
Like, yeah, I enjoy what this episode adds to the lore, and I like how it progresses it, and I think there's a handful of kind of really cute interactions in it, which are fun. But I kind of agree it's a little bit disjointed. But I think for the season, the thing at the narrative, the thing that this is maybe the standard in terms of like there's just episodes where things are happening. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I would give it 6.7, 6.7 pumping him, 6.7 pumping him in no times out of 10. I think it's definitely a connective tissue episode, but still I find it a little uncharming. Very little happens. Definitely a couple of nice, cute interactions, specifically the Xander and Anya interaction, and definitely the Willow interaction in the outside of the butcher where she's like trying to pretend to be evil still. That's quite funny, but for the most part, it's just a little lacking. Though it does highlight, of course, that lesbians and gays are truly in a constant battle and hate each other, which is very important. I
actually had that written down that as a gay man, Willow is Andrew's natural predator. As she chases him down the street.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Should we move on to the Cordelia chase?
Yeah, so over in the Cordelia chase, we're continuing the Beast arc, and it's Long Day's journey, and it's kind of really similar in some ways to what's happening in Buffy. We have this kind of episode into episode into episode, kind of the same few days, kind of playing it relatively chronologically. And in this, we have the Beast's kind of continuous rampage across Los Angeles, and we get a lot of kind of lore dump and kind of flimsy lore dump in this episode. That basically the girl in the Wolfram Heart building was part of a totem of 5 mystical creatures called the Ra Tet, which represent the sun god Ra.
I always feel it's really questionable to be like, oh, hey, that thing, it's actually part of a larger thing, and that larger thing, oh, it's already gone by the end of the episode. It's like, there's no need then.
Yeah, and of it, we only properly meet 2.5 of them, basically. But yeah, she's Mescatet, and then there's like Manutet and Keristet, etc. And, you know, by backwards and forwards, we find out that the Beast needs to harvest something from each of these totems to create something which is going to do something bad. That's the gist of it. And it is a weird way to reintroduce that Electro girl from previous episode, Gwen Regan, who one of her clients who she meets turns out to be one of the totems who is harvested. That brings her in, and they go on a bit of a kind of investigation to try and find the surviving ones. It turns out a lot of them conveniently live in Los Angeles, despite being, you know, 5,000-year-old deific, you know, representations of Ra. And they find one of them who really is weird for the amount of focus he's given. He's like Manutet, but he's like, oh, I prefer Manny. I'm a representation of just the average man. You know, I'm a kind of sleaze ball with a
heart of gold.
No, not even, just with like a Hawaiian shirt or whatever. He's only in about 11 minutes of the episode, and it's about 2/5 of the way through. You know, it's neither the start nor the end. And
then he gets brutally murdered. And one of the things that's basically the kind of the tension there is there's this whole thing where we're trying to treat in any way normalize the fact that Cordelia is sleeping with Connor, which now multiple people know. So Lauren definitely knows it as well. And it's treated as like a romantic tension between her and Angel as opposed to it being his song, you know, from the past, future, or whatever. Angel has a little bit of a flirtation with Gwen, and this is mostly to annoy Cordelia. He's just mean to everyone for no particular reason. He's back doing that thing again. Well, in fairness, it's been like 18 episodes since the last time he did it, so...
Yeah. And I think that's what's the only most useful thing it introduces is just this question of like, okay, they're definitely being betrayed or followed in some way, and who within the group is doing it. And they set up that it could be Angel, or specifically in kind of a very convenient logical leap that it turns out that Angelus rather than Angel had some interaction with the Beast hundreds of years ago. So within seconds everyone's like, well, obviously if Angelus has met him, then what we need to do is remove Angel's soul. Yeah,
a natural conclusion, like
the big possibly the biggest thing that can happen to him and his character. Yeah. And that sets up kind of our, you know, a reason to have kind of, you know, Angelus in the coming episodes. And yeah, just like, I don't know if anything really stuck out to me from the episode was likable or enjoyable. So
it was, for me, it was like the beginning of this arc is getting old. Yeah. And it hasn't been that long since we started.
So maybe like,
I'm going to give it a generous 6 failed feminist gestures. Because there were like moments of goodness, of fun and silliness and whatever.
Okay, that's quite generous. I think
you go for 5, it's fine. Or 4.
I'm going to give 5 because I think this arc gets worse.
Oh god!
Do you know what I mean? Like there's definitely a nadir of this, you know.
Yeah. So going for the 5. Frothiness of season 5. Season 5 is frothy.
Yeah, it's right? It's like a lovely cappuccino. Yeah. So I think that's everything for this week. So if you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. Tell your friends. Tell the doggos, catos, and petos in your life.
No. Tell your friends. Tell your birthday invitees.
Tell your birthday invitees. About what do you usually say after that?
I can't remember. I don't say it. I don't listen either.
Tell your birthday invitees about Buffy Boys. That's us. Brian, Joel, Booker, and Ludo.
Yeah. Oh, and if you're wondering, Ludo, not a reference to Labyrinth, though Labyrinth is a wonderful movie.
Or the game.
Or the classic board game Ludo, though it definitely is a nice thing that it means play in Greek. It's a reference to one of my favorite books of all time, which is The Last Samurai by Helen DeWitt, which is just absolutely wonderful. But the main character is called Ludo in it, and we both and you love it as well. Shared it, kind of early on. Jill got me a first edition copy of the book for the first birthday that we were together. It was really nice. There you go. Okay.
Thanks, super thanks. See you next time, right here on Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys, indeed. See you.